Hello, everyone. Dr. Gaynor here to talk with you about Neil Postman's information. We had a good discussion on this in class today. We're going to recreate it here. Now that I figured out that my sound and my screen record are working, we will be able to do these live from now on. So we have a very lengthy article that's a chapter in Neil Postman's book. And this was, in fact, about information and how our society has information everywhere. And we determined that we have information in lots of places: the newspaper, the internet, books. Those were all just some of the things that Postman talked about. And he said that we have information all over the place. Maybe we've never had so much information at our fingertips in human history. So information can be repeated across media, and maybe that's not necessary. Newspapers and other information sources often get stuck on, oh, sorry, newspaper and other information sources get stuck on and not because. And Katie brought that up, I believe, and that's true. We hear in the newspaper or on an online source, like, this happened, and then that happened, and then this other thing happened, and this person was there, and that person wasn't. And it's just and, right? It's a list of events. But we don't always hear the because. This happened because that person was there because it led to this because. So Postman says that it's the because that's missing from the accounts of a lot of things we get. And he said that he didn't even think newspapers, which he really, really likes, if you couldn't tell, solved that issue entirely. That editorial opinion pages weren't really where that was to be found either. So we also found out through Postman that newspapers are edited and they're likely to be correct, more likely than other things. Marissa said that they're more accurate for our area. If you look at a local newspaper, we're going to find out things that are happening here that are relevant to us here. We have one newspaper, the Calhoun Chronicle, and that's pretty accurate for what's going on in our area. Now, we also have the Her Herald, but we also said that sometimes Bob can get a little out there, like he's had to prevent or say that stuff needs to be redone or taken it down, or it's not always the whole story when you get on the Herald. It's a little different than our local paper, which has authors and it does have an editor. So information is everywhere now. But the problem with that, the class said, is it could be easily misconstrued, the information could be twisted, and it's not always the same. So those are all things that we have to look out for when we're talking about the information and where we got it. Just because it's information, just because it looks legitimate, does not mean that it is. So Postman had some different stages. And he said that everything started with facts. Facts are everywhere, like how many feet are in a mile, what's the freezing point of water, such and such and such. We have facts. Facts are all over the place. And when you put facts together with other statements, then you can get information. Facts make up information. So we get what's really information. It's full of facts, or it should be. But information, just because we have it in and of itself, doesn't make us any smarter or any better. We would need to go on then and organize our information into knowledge. Information organized is knowledge. And finally, knowledge can lead us to wisdom. So this is the goal, the main goal here, wisdom. But that's a long way from facts. And a lot of the stuff we have today gets stuck here, right, in the information category. It doesn't even go on into knowledge. Like if you go and you're in a major in college and you start out, and let's say you're in veterinary medicine, you're going to have to learn a lot of facts to start with as you're just beginning your studies. And you're going to put that facts together in information. And the first couple years, you're really kind of going to be in this area. But the more information you have, it leads to knowledge. You can look at something and know what that means, what it's related to, what it might likely also cause. So you have knowledge about a subject. But not everybody that gets knowledge in a subject area also has wisdom about it. If we think about technology in our society today, all kinds of people have knowledge of technology, and they make weird and wonderful and sometimes scary technological inventions, like those test monitoring softwares that some colleges and even high schools are using to remotely monitor students taking tests. And if your eyes shift away from the screen for X amount of seconds, I'm not even sure what it is, you can get flagged as cheating. And while I guess that's an interesting invention if you're all about catching people cheating on exams, but did anybody ever stop to think, should we make this software? Like, what else could that be used for? What other purposes, like some kind of surveillance, might that end up going into? So I think a lot of the times we have to worry about just because we can do something, does that mean we should? Just because it's possible to investigate this, invent this, create this, should it be done? Like, is it really in the end going to benefit people or is it going to bring about harm? So, those are good questions always to ask. And wisdom is knowing whether we should or we shouldn't, like whether something is really worth that kind of risk. So, one of the quotes from Postman here was that knowledge is organized information that is embedded in a context and has a purpose and it leads to understanding. If we put a citation on that, it would come up to Postman 495. All right, there we go. So knowledge is organized information. So it's all information's not just thrown together, right? We put it together in a way that makes sense. We've embedded it in a context. When does this happen? Where? To whom? And all that. And it has a purpose. Like, what does it mean to have this information? What can it lead us to? And then hopefully it leads us to understanding something better, to have knowledge that's organized, okay? To have information that's organized. So those are all things that we would want to consider. And he also says in there that any fool can have an opinion, and an opinion is definitely not knowledge. And I think that is an important factor to remember. We did do some talking about the way that people will believe stuff on the internet, like the people who, there were a lot of older people who believed a rumor on Facebook this summer that there was going to be an 8-day solar eclipse. And that seems funny if you know science, because we know that's not how solar eclipses work, but there were people who thought that was real. So they were believing something that was made up, right? And they weren't using their knowledge. If you know about the sun and you know about how eclipses happen and you see that, you're like, dude, this is not true. But those people weren't able to do that, and so they were taken in. So for all of the fact that Postman goes on a lot about newspapers, sometimes they get tricked, especially those ones that have an online presence. So we're going to take a look at something that happened